Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
On behalf of Gender Ideal, welcome. I'm Flory Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of Gender Ideal. I'm delighted to have you all joining us for our final LinkedIn Live session. This series has explored the concepts covered in the Ideal 12 assessment, a tool that Gender Ideal launched in March of 2022 that's designed to be a first step for companies to benchmark their performance on 12 core practices that have impact on gender equity in the workplace. We hope you walk away from each of these conversations with the insights you need to be an advocate inside of your organization on how and why to begin implementation of these practices. Links to this video, all of the other LinkedIn Live interviews that we've done, and additional resources can be found on the resources page of our website. And you can find all of that at www.gender-ideal.org. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today with Jason Aulicino. Jason started his career at Apple, training employees and running their leadership development programs. His passion for training brought him to New Relic, a leading technology company focused on cloud technology and performance observability. As a manager of talent and organizational development, Jason has been heavily involved in onboarding, leadership training, employee experience, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're really lucky to have you here today. We wanted to do a session with you, Jason, because we found a high correlation in our data set between companies that have integrated allyship into their institutional culture via trainings, incentives, and other mechanisms that are designed to mainstream that practice of allyship. And there's a close correlation between companies that have done that and overall performance on the Gender Ideal assessment. So it is not today a common practice. Like, we've actually only had a handful of companies that are doing this. And so I think it's a practice that seems to reflect really a best-in-class approach to creating equitable cultures and work environments. And so while allyship is not currently a common programmatic pillar for many companies, we wanted to have this conversation with you because we believe it should be a common practice. And in conversations that you and I have had, what you've demonstrated is that New Relic has been very intentional and thoughtful and proactive in launching this kind of allyship program. So let's dig in. Really curious to cover all topics of how and why you launched the allyship program. So let's just start, Jason, with why did New Relic decide to launch a curriculum focused on allyship? And I guess it would be nice to hear if there was like a particular experience or a set of data that motivated the team to do this.
Sure. And thank you so much for having me. This is a big pleasure of mine to be able to come on here with you about this. Very passionate about this subject and about allyship. How this came about for us was that we were in the middle of launching anti-harassment training, more from a compliance angle. And I think what we were discovering was that I feel like anti-harassment training has its place and it serves a great purpose. And some of the feedback we were getting about it was that all anti-harassment training is really about punitive action or singling out folks that are doing something wrong. And it does focus a little bit more on legality, what is within and inside and outside the law. And what a lot of people were asking for was, they said, what about those upstanding folks? What about those people that are doing really well and they just want to know what else they could be doing to make their company a more inclusive place? So while harassment training or anti-harassment training is focusing on making sure people don't do something bad, we wanted something that would be, how can we have everyone else kind of focus on what we can do to make things even better, or focus on more of a positive behaviors that we can have in our everyday actions that could make our company, a thriving place to feel included.
Yeah. That's great. I think that helpful to think about it through that. I think so many organizations are focused on their compliance training, anti-bias, anti-harassment, et cetera. And to hear that you all, flipped that around and said, well, right, there's the do no harm approach, but also how are we encouraging and rewarding positive behavior? That's really powerful. Um,
Exactly.
so let's get into then the process of developing and launching the curriculum. Were there any elements? Well, actually, I'll just start there. Tell us about developing and designing and then launching that program.
Sure. So this was something that we really knew that was not something we could create on our own. We wanted to get some help from those folks that are doing this professionally and have some experience with this. So we did take part in a train the trainer with Frameshift Consulting and the ADA Initiative. They have a fantastic project and a fantastic workshop that they already put on. So we were asked to or we had the privilege of sitting in on that and taking the course ourselves, myself and a few others from New Relic. And then they pass over the materials to us and work a bit as a consultant to make sure that we're tailoring the information for New Relic specifically and make sure it feels genuine for our audience. What we combined that with was another really great workshop that I took called Hollaback, which talks about the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. One of the most impactful things that I did was learn about these 5 Ds, which basically outlines 5 specific actions that you can do when you see something that you feel is a little bit out of your company's values or just not quite right. 5 different ways that you can get in and get involved. So taking these 2 workshops that we had the experience of attending, combining it and putting New Relic's spin on it, I think really gave us what we were looking for in the foundation for a great allyship workshop.
Got it. 2 follow-up questions. One, how long ago did you do those trainings and start the program? Was this like in the last year or 2, or do you have kind of several years now of running the program? And I guess a follow-on would be, and if it has been a couple of years, like how has it evolved? How have you pivoted in any way that curriculum?
Sure. Yeah. So this was back in 2018. So we've been doing it for quite some time now. I just checked yesterday, and I think we've done 62 sessions total as of last week. I just did one for our interns, our brand new interns. So yeah, it's been going for a while. Um, and I think really what we're trying to focus on is we wanted to have a workshop that was hands-on, so that was very, very interactive. It was kind of listening to a talking head. So there's lots of small groups that we create where people can interact with each other and talk about these issues in small groups. And some of the things we really wanted to make sure that it was very actionable, that people could take to dos with them and things that they can start immediately changing in their behaviors right after the workshop. And I think the last couple things we wanted to make sure that it was focused on was that microaggressions. I'm a huge proponent of educating people on microaggressions. I have a strong belief that we can talk about these very big, overt acts of racism, homophobia, or sexism. And what my hope is that you're not seeing those giant abrasive acts in your day-to-day work. But what I think you are seeing, and something else to focus more so on, are these microaggressions, which may be overlooked or people may not actually see the harm in those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and lastly, I would say is the workshop needed to focus on vulnerability, that people felt like it was a safe place to talk about these things. We weren't in there to punish someone, or we weren't in there to call out folks and say, wow, you've been doing really harmful things forever and you need to repent for that. It was
Right.
much more, we all make mistakes. We can all learn from them, and let's figure out how to course correct or do better now, looking back and knowing what may have happened in the past.
And so, just so I'm clear on the structure and the format, it sounds like you're curating the groups, right? So, are you trying to bring peers together so you would have a training session that might be, all senior vice presidents, or do you try to have a, mixed in terms of hierarchy, et cetera, group when you do these trainings? Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure, sure. So it is open enrollment. We do try to get a mix of folks from across the company, across time zones, across backgrounds. However, I have also done focused workshops for a single team or a certain organization, or like last week for our entire cohort of new interns. So we've done both.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's is it a one-time training, and you go through the whole curriculum at that time, and then, as you said, it's action oriented, so it's, a couple hours that people are spending together, but then the goal is that they walk away from that session, or do I have that right? And just in terms of structure?
Sure. So in terms of specifics, a week before the event starts, they do get some pre-work. So just getting some terminology that we're going to be covering and some overall basics so that we can kind of hit the ground running. The workshop itself is 3 hours long. It consists of maybe about an hour of presentation style where we're going over terminology, we're going over the microaggressions mini course, and then kind of the 5 Ds that I discussed before, the 5 different ways that you can get involved as an ally. And then it's about 2 hours of working in small groups, going over different kinds of scenarios that they may encounter in the workplace, and then discussing with small groups how they would use those allyship skills to respond to those scenarios. And the scenarios try to span everything from racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, a little mix of everything.
That's
Oh, and then about 2 months later, they do receive a follow-up assessment, which checks in with them. We love the idea of retention as much as possible. We're trying to make this uh, lasting behaviors. So they fill out a questionnaire and a little self-assessment on how well they've been doing, giving them some tips on how they can keep going with their allyship, and and just a little bit of a reminder of things that we covered in the workshop.
Got it. Okay. You've mentioned the 5 Ds. I'm
Mhm.
going to put you on the spot, but can you tell us what those 5 Ds are? Can you give us like a little overview of them?
Sure, I can. Putting me on the spot here. So direct would just be you say something in the moment. So you hear something, see something, say something immediately.
Mhm.
And that's everything from positive intent, like, oh, you may not have realized you said this, or you may not realize what that word means, but let me give you a little bit of clarification on that.
Yeah.
The second D is delay, which means you may not decide to do anything in the moment, but you may wait a bit of time and then find a better time and check in with the person afterwards.
Yeah.
There's the distract method, which is you witness an awkward conversation or something that shouldn't be being talked about in the workplace. So you either distract the conversation to talk about something else, you do something kind of silly or outlandish so that people stop paying attention to what's going on and they pay attention to you instead. So you kind of distract away from the targeted person or distract away from the awkward conversation. There is delegate, which simply means I want to get someone involved with some authority, which means I can't do it myself, but let me call a manager or an HR representative to jump in and take care of this for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And then last is document, which is screenshotting something or sending an email to someone to just document something that you overheard or something that you read online, and getting it to the right person. Yeah.
That's helpful. Helpful just to hear that framing, and I imagine depending on the circumstance and situation and who the people are that are involved, someone might feel like I can directly, insert myself into this and address it, or they might say, gosh, I'm a little uncomfortable. I'm going to delay, and then maybe delegate or something. But like to have that framing gives people the language to even work through, in their own minds, kind of how they want to handle and address it. So, okay,
Right.
thank you,
Right.
and good work remembering the 5 Ds. Um, so, so you've had this program in place since 2018. I'm curious, now that you have a little bit of hindsight, are there um, are there particular elements of the program that you think are really important and that kind of have the most impact? Are there things that you've phased out of the curriculum as it's evolved over time? I'd love to just kind of hear how the work has changed.
Sure. So it has evolved and been updated. So we rarely ever take anything out, but what usually happens is we just remove it from the live presentation and include it in follow-up materials instead. And we're always trying to make room for more relevant or I would say timely issues. What's really nice about this workshop is we cover about 6 or 7 scenarios. That's what we usually have time for in the time allotted for that. And it's very easy to swap out some of those scenarios at any moment to keep the workshop fresh, or to keep it the most impactful for today's audience. 2 examples of scenarios we've switched out is we added a scenario during the Black Lives Matter movement when a lot of that stuff was in the headlines. And that scenario has stayed in there. And we recently added a very specific scenario about transphobia, specifically about dead naming. So someone continuing to use someone's former name or former pronouns, and how that can be problematic and appear as transphobia if you do that for a coworker or for a peer.
Okay, that's great. That's really helpful to hear how to keep the content relevant and current. So how have you seen, let's talk about the impact of the program now. Like, how have you seen allyship manifest amongst your workforce? And you had, before the call, you had also talked about work plans and goal setting that employees do following the training. So can you maybe talk a little bit high level how it's maybe had impact on the organization, and then very specifically on individual employees, what that impact is?
Sure. So all of our high-level organizational leaders, they do have action plans and goals for the year that they kind of set for themselves. And I believe every single one of our leaders, part of their strategic game plan for the year is to get all their leaders and team members through the Ally Skills training. We're making direct connections through between DE&I efforts and business success. We know that when people can feel their most authentic self, that it raises your productivity and it raises your output, which then does really great for New Relic, which does really great for our customers. So it's all about people feeling like they're bringing their true authentic self and their true authentic passions to work. So we're trying to create that safe environment for people to be able to do that. The other types of goals that are included with that would be anything from hiring goals to career development goals for their teams. And that's all kind of really tied into an overall allyship program and goal setting.
It's interesting. I mean, when you look at data on what kinds of practices, policies have the most impact and move the needle on creating that culture of equity and inclusion, tying goals, performance expectations to specific metrics that you want to meet, and then tying that back to potentially compensation or bonuses, like that, hands down, is the most powerful driver to get everyone on board with these programs. And so I think, you know, the way that New Relic has really approached this, not just to offer the training, but then to say, like, let's really make sure this is being put into action and hold ourselves to account, and hopefully to reward people who are doing more. Like, that's awesome. That's a really powerful example. And again, one that we don't see that often from companies that have participated in the gender ideal assessment. But when we do see it, there's, again, like, very clear correlation with high performance overall.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, every leader is encouraged to share their report cards, as we call them, about how they're doing with most of the, you know, with all their DE&I goals. So it is a form of celebration and a form of learning mindset to say, we may not have got what we were looking for this quarter, but we're passionate and we're still heading towards these goals, and kind of sharing those results company-wide has been really great.
That's awesome. That's great. Let's see. So okay, I think you've given us like a good sense for where the program started, how it's evolved. You said you've done 62 trainings. I'm curious, have all employees now gone through this program? How do you then see the program evolving into the future? Are there going to be different levels of the curriculum, et cetera? Would love to kind of hear your thoughts on where you see this work going in the future.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple things that are already in play and already in the works. One is that we recently finished a pilot of Ally Skills 201. Ally Skills 201 is focused on our leadership team specifically. And the focus is moving from a kind of reactive nature of allyship, which means, you know, I see something, I react to it, to being more proactive, and also using your positional power as a leader, as a people leader, to further allyship at New Relic and really make some lasting change. So Ally Skills 201 focuses on how can you as a leader affect inclusion even more at New Relic. We all walk into that workshop with a goal setting agenda and leave with a specific game plan that you develop with your fellow peers in the workshop. And then you head out of that workshop with that goal. Our suggested goals are anything around increasing diversity at New Relic with hiring efforts, career development for your underrepresented groups, mentorship, either by you yourself being a mentor or organizing or connecting someone to a mentor. And then, of course, there's also goals about ensuring everyone in your team is taken 101. And then there's kind of a choose your own adventure option, which you create your own diversity, equity, inclusion goal.
Okay, that's great. You mentioned mentorship, and that was one thing I wanted to kind of delve in with you as well. A couple of weeks ago, we did a session with a partner at McKinsey, Ankur Kumar, who's been involved in the Lean In McKinsey Women at Work study for a number of years, and she was talking about. So she was talking about kind of three components of this work: mentorship, allyship, and then sponsorship. And so I'm curious how New Relic, like, do you kind of use those same three categories? Do you have programs designed to foster all three of those, and if so, like, yeah, where does the allyship fit into perhaps those other pieces?
Yeah, I'll speak just a little bit on mentorship because it's still something that's happening organically. It's a little less structured and programmatic. So we encourage folks at New Relic to really own their own careers, which means owning that mentorship process as well. We as leaders encourage them to take the time to do this and help them find a mentor. But then that meeting cadence and kind of what they talk about, we want it to be organic and be in their hands. We do have some guidance and some one pagers around things that should be discussed or how a conversation can flow, some suggestions on how often to meet and what to meet about. But at this point, yeah, we want it to kind of be in the hands of the person so that they get what they want out of it.
That makes sense. And what about?
Future, I think we'd love to have something that's a little more organized. I think we're building up to that. But yeah, that's what's happening right now. Yeah.
Okay. And what about on the sponsorship side? Is that something that you train people on, or you try to foster, or that's not yet part of your program?
I think that'll probably be also in kind of our next steps as well. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I know that some organizations, and there's been some efforts around sponsorship, but yeah, it's happening in pockets right now.
That makes sense. And the last question I have for you, so I'd say New Relic is on the larger end of the companies that we typically are working with at Gender Ideal. And, often when we give recommendations to, especially those smaller companies that might have, 100 or 200 employees around actions they should take, they say, gosh, but we're so small. How would we get started? And so I'm just curious, what advice would you give to a small business that wants to start doing allyship work? Is there an easy way to get started? Is there some curriculum that you would recommend? What would your suggestions be to a smaller company?
Yeah, I mean, education is so important, and I think that we, for those folks that are hoping to organize some allyship in their company, self-educate first. Like I said, we knew that we didn't have all the answers ourselves, so we hired a consultant and we took courses ourselves and became not certified, but became educated in how to deliver it internally. I think that was a big turning point for us. I would highly recommend the Hollaback courses, and also highly recommend, as I mentioned, Frameshift Consulting, which we can link out afterwards. But I know that they're continuing to do this work for small companies that are trying to get started. So they're there to help.
Good. Okay. Those are awesome resources. Well, Jason, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise and your experience doing this work. I mean, it's really valuable. I think hearing how New Relic has kind of navigated launching and expanding a program like this will serve to inspire other organizations to do the same. And we'll make sure that we post links to Hollaback and Frame. Sorry, I'm already
Frameshift Consulting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. we'll include links to them. And thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time. Okay.
Appreciate
Have
you
a
having
great
me.
rest.
Thank you.
Okay.
You too.